Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am excited. We are finishing up our series, hashtag CO Election Watch. That's Colorado Election Watch. I have it in studio with me, Jeff Wasden, president of the Colorado Business Roundtable. On the phone, we have both Walker Stapleton. He is the Republican candidate running for governor, as well as Ed Seelover with the Denver Business Journal. We're going to go ahead and jump right in.
Yeah, let's jump right in. And Walker, I'll throw the first question at you. And I want to really focus on your business background and how a Stapleton administration will look at governing business in the state of Colorado and what you'll do to encourage business and economic development here if you're victorious.
Well, I've been a treasurer who has fought for the taxpayers of Colorado, has passed with no legislative control, bipartisan economic policy legislation from debt consolidation that has increased transparency and accountability for issuance of debt across Colorado state agencies, for all agencies with the exception of Department of Transportation and Higher Education. Somebody who started the first ever Land Trust Investment Board, which is $1 billion of money that we actively invest now, and the money goes to our Education Permanent Fund through K-12 education. Somebody who's provided relief to county treasurers when the federal government had U.S. Treasuries were downgraded by one of the main ratings agencies. So my entire time in state government in Colorado has been finding pragmatic solutions to some of the economic challenges Colorado has faced. We've come out with detailed plans to fund our roads, improve access and affordability to health care, make sure that we keep more dollars in the classroom. And this contrasts sharply with my opponent, Congressman Polis, who has made approximately $90 billion of promises in cost or spending. As treasurer, I can tell you that the state budget today is $30 billion, $20 billion comes from all of us as taxpayers, $10 billion comes from the federal government and has been used primarily for Medicaid expansion. And if you are going to triple the size of the state government in Colorado, the only two ways you pay for that are by increasing people's personal income taxes. And we have TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, as a defense mechanism against that. But he has said that he would gut TABOR, and he bragged about fighting TABOR and winning. Or alternatively, you take it out on the business community legislatively through regulations and fees. Either one of those things makes Colorado a terrible place to live and work for the future. And I want to make sure that that is not the future we have in Colorado.
Now, you talked about your support, in particular for the state's oil and gas industry. So I don't think we need to go into, how much you support it, but could you explain what particular steps you would take to keep that industry running smoothly and any changes you would make from current law?
First of all, safety is paramount in respect to the industry, and I would make sure the industry is accountable, transparent. I'm proud that Colorado already has one of the most stringent regulatory systems for the energy industry in Colorado. I believe, though, that Coloradans are being presented with a false choice if people are being asked to choose between an industry that respects what all of us as Coloradans respect, which is clean air to breathe, mountains that we can hike with our kids in summer, and streams that we can fish with our kids as well, with an energy industry that's contributing 230,000 jobs and $32 billion annually to our economy. I think we can have both, and we must have both for Colorado's future. And so I would make sure that I was a governor that worked collaboratively with the industry, that worked within the framework of a one Colorado energy policy that every governor from Roy Romer on, Republican, Democrat, Governor Owens, Governor Ritter, and Governor Hickenlooper has largely supported, where we have a single regulatory framework that is easily understood, because we're not going to have an energy industry that's going to invest in Colorado if we have local municipal rule and we have different places deciding universally that they're going to ban fracking in their communities. That does not work for the energy industry. And that is in stark contrast to Congressman Polis, who just 3 years ago bankrolled a 2,000-foot setback that energy industry folks will tell you will have had the same effect as 112 passing this year on the ballot if it were to pass, and that is it would wipe out 230,000 jobs collectively, 100,000 Latino jobs, and $32 billion of annual economic impact to Colorado, and we would never recover from that. Furthermore, I'm the only candidate in the governor's race that has an all-of-the-above energy policy. I support wind. I support solar. I support natural gas. I support oil. And I support clean coal technology. But I don't support, like Congressman Polis, subsidizing alternate forms of energy on the back of hardworking Coloradans. We've spent $1.2 trillion globally on alternate energy sources, and they still represent less than 3% of the world's energy production. He started out his campaign for governor saying we would be 100% renewable by 2030. Then he moved it back by 2040. The best part about it is that he won't even be around to suffer the consequences of that mandate. He'll be long gone. Economists have said it will cost Colorado $45 billion. Our budget's only $30 billion, and the people who will pay for it are Coloradans who can least afford it, because those costs will be passed on by the energy industry in the form of higher electric bills and higher heating bills on the Coloradans who are struggling for their families. And that's not a Colorado I want in the future either.
And real quickly, so any changes, or would you just largely keep in place the regulatory framework from now?
Well, I think the regulatory framework has worked well, and I think that if you look at the history of our setbacks in Colorado, we went from 100 feet to 300 feet, then to 500 feet, and 1,000 feet for commercial areas, and I think that that's been a workable framework. I certainly don't support increasing the setbacks like Congressman Polis does.
That energy that's powering our vehicles is not necessarily making our commute any easier in the morning or evening. Walker, there's two different transportation initiatives, Prop 109, Prop 110 on the ballot. There's a possibility that they both could pass, but a more distinct possibility they both fail. If that's the case, where do we find the money to expand highways and capacity and improve the commute and quality of life for working Coloradans?
Well, I support 109. My opponent doesn't support either and has not one iota of an idea how to fund infrastructure in Colorado, which means he doesn't have any plan except to drive jobs and economic opportunities out of Colorado. I know we can find the money. I'm the only candidate in this governor's race that has come up with 4 different sources of revenue to the general fund, which we can use for transportation. Number one, I've talked about the federal tax plan. Economists have said, and the state's chief economist, we could have as much as $1 billion windfall. I want as much money as possible from that to go to roads and infrastructure funding. He wants to repeal the federal tax plan and take all that money out. I've talked about taxing sports gambling, which the American Gaming Commission has said is a $150 billion industry across the country. I've talked about taxing it in much the same way that the lottery system in Colorado contributes to GOCO. I've talked about more transparency and accountability in the Department of Transportation so we can find out why we spend more per mile on maintenance and other costs than 8 other mountain states. And if we kept our costs in check, we could have approximately $150 million more for bonding. And I've talked about fixing what I think is a broken regulatory system with regards to medicinal marijuana. All of those things will go to transportation during my leadership, and none of them will go to transportation under Congressman Polis's leadership, or lack thereof.
And just a quick follow-up to that, Walker. How does transit fit into all that as you start to look at capacity?
I believe that we have such a acute need to spend money on roads and bridges that I am not for multimodal transportation like Congressman Polis is. I believe that is one of the many reasons I don't support Proposition or Amendment 110, because 60 cents on the dollar are going to roads and bridges. I want to make sure that we fund roads and bridges. The Pueblo County has nearly 3 dozen crumbling bridges, and we need to actually spend money on roads and bridges and not underutilize public transport or bike lanes, as cool as they may be. We need the money to go to our roads and go to our bridges.
Well, speaking of costly things, let's turn to health care. You've laid out a plan that speaks about lowering insurance costs and increasing mental health services in particular. But a lot of your plan relies on assertions that you'll work with providers, insurers, and advocates to come up with ways to make this happen. Realistically, what can you do in, say, your first year to make a difference in these areas?
Well, I have talked about expanding community health centers, working with doctors and nurses on the front lines of Medicaid expansion, working with innovators in Colorado in the Medicaid space, like Liz Concordia, who runs UC Health, like Jenna Hausman, who runs Children's Hospital. These are people that actually have experienced the pain of the Medicaid system that doesn't necessarily produce the best cost outcome for individuals or for insurance companies. And I know we can do a better job in providing Medicaid expansion. There are too many government agencies right now that are involved in Medicaid expansion in Colorado, from the Department of Health Services to HCPF, to our Department of Regulatory agencies, to our insurance agency in the state. And the more we can streamline the process of Medicaid expansion in Colorado, the more we can make sure that we are guarding against overbilling, fraud, abuse. And I know we can do a better job by taking that approach. And that's why I've talked about doing just that as governor. And I've talked about making sure that we can get more choice in the marketplace of catastrophic health insurance for young people who are generally healthy, who are now in 14 of our 64 counties paying more for health insurance than they are for their home mortgages or for their rent. And that choice starts with the governor, who is willing to take a collaborative effort. And I have a big difference, as both of you know, with Congressman Polis, who was a federal sponsor of Birthing Care, a Medicare for All plan, and wants to bring it to the state, which is state-run health care that is more expensive than the system I defeated 2 years ago with Governor Ritter, our former Democratic governor, in a bipartisan way. And Congressman Polis has said he plans to pay for them through payroll taxes. Well, the proposed payroll tax 2 years ago was 10% on all businesses. So it's fair question to ask, is he proposing a 15% payroll tax on businesses? Is it higher? Because if that's the case, no business will operate in Colorado anymore, from Grease Monkey to Pizza Hut to Merrill Lynch. And that is not the economic future I want to see in Colorado. Furthermore, it would result in less payments to docs, and a shortage of rural doctors in areas of Colorado would become much worse.
And so you talked particularly about Medicaid and your opposition to government-funded health care. What, though, I mean, for the employers who are listening right now, what, though, can you do to help them control their costs?
What I can do is provide more choice in the marketplace, less barriers to entry, because more choice results in better outcomes for medical consumers, and it results in better outcomes for the full spectrum of people in the healthcare marketplace, insurance companies as well. I've talked about transparency in billing. My running mate, Lang Sias, when he was in the legislature last year, passed the first ever transparency for emergency room billing. I think that's a model that should be carried all across our healthcare network in Colorado, because transparency helps illuminate a lot of problems, a lot of waste, a lot of fraud, and a lot of problems. And I can tell you, having talked with healthcare nonprofits who are frustrated with our Department of Health Services, having talked to Medicaid recipients that are frustrated with HCPF, we can absolutely do a better, more effective job of administrating Medicaid expansion in Colorado, and we have to make it sustainable so that it doesn't break the bank.
Walker, for years, this administration, the state legislature, has really taken some dramatic steps to improve the talent pipeline from state schools into professions needing more workers. That focus on career readiness. If elected, what will be your focus? What more can you add to that? And what is the role of the government versus the private sector in ensuring that companies in the state of Colorado have the human capital and resources to innovate and compete that's necessary?
Skills-based training is an incredibly important part of education and of higher education, because the idea that everybody should go to college is not only shouldn't be the case, but it also ends up being an empty promise to individuals who get saddled with thousands of dollars of student loan debt that they have no means of repaying. And we have a real crisis going on in this country of the trillions of dollars of unfunded student loan debt. It's why I've talked about the state of Colorado taking a more proactive approach to higher ed through concurrent enrollment, which allows people to take classes and get college credit during their high school years, to an income sharing agreement, which was actually started by former Governor Mitch Daniels, who's the head of Purdue, whereby an institution works out a contract with an individual so that in exchange for a first-class education, the individual pays a portion of the education back from his or her first job over a period of time to working with companies like Toyota that started a great program called Kentucky Fame, which is a skills-based training program that matches up individuals of promise with Fortune 500 companies and guarantees them employment. And this is incredibly important in Colorado, especially in areas of our state where we have failing public school systems. And so I would be a governor that championed a multi-layered approach to actually making sure that the state government was a collaborative player in skills-based education training.
So that's one area that businesses are concerned about. Business groups for years also have faced a number of proposed employee-employer regulations that they feel will impact them. And those are almost certainly coming back in 2019, particularly if the Democrats win control of the state Senate. So I have a two-part question here. I want to ask you first about your general view of when government should insert itself into the employee-employer relation process. And then I want to ask very quickly afterwards about your opinion of 5 of those plans. But in general, what's government's role in employee-employer relations?
I would like to keep government out of employer-employee relations. I think government generally regulates too much in the workplace. I think we have protections of equal pay for equal work. And as the father of 2 daughters, I certainly would be a governor that would support that. At the federal level, I'd make sure that we have family leave policies in place for companies. But I'm concerned when government puts its thumbprint on small business owners and gives them mandates of what doctors to choose, what health care plan they have to sign up. Universal mandates are crushing small businesses, and they're not working out well for Colorado's future. And so I'm a governor that I will be a governor that makes sure that that Colorado keeps out of the business community as much as possible with needless regulations.
Okay, good. Here's the 5 that have come up in the past that are going to come back. I want to ask you about real quickly. 1, employee-funded but still mandatory paid leave systems. That's something you would get behind.
Yes.
Okay. 2, and you're welcome to extrapolate on it if you want, but yes and no is fine too.
No, I support paid leave.
Okay. 2, state-run retirement savings system that employers must offer to their employees if they don't have their own retirement systems.
No, I definitely would never suggest that an individual join a state-run system that, in Colorado's case, is still billions and billions of dollars underfunded.
3, pay equity laws, particularly those barring employers from asking about salary history. Yes, I support pay equity laws. 4, a ban the box bill, as it's called, that would prohibit employers from asking about job seekers' felony history on employment applications.
Ban the box? Which is what?
It would prohibit employers from asking about job seekers' basically, do you have a felony history on employment applications?
No. If you have a felony history, I think employers should know about it.
Okay. And lastly, a measure that would allow cities and counties to raise their minimum wages above the state minimum wage level.
No.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks for running the gamut with me there.
As our state treasurer, Walker, you've got a unique perspective on the state's budget. Based on our current budget, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest changes you would like to see made in that $30 billion budget?
Well, we need more flexibility in budgeting. It's why I support a bipartisan effort that my friend Bob Rankin is bringing forward to update the Gallagher Amendment and how it collects residential versus commercial property taxes. That is an effort that is linked to school finance in Colorado and really important for school districts that don't have as high property values or have kept residential property taxes rather relatively low, and I think that hopefully they come up with a workable solution, because I think that's going to be helpful, and I think it's going to be helpful not to make a lot of promises that we can't pay for, and that's why Congressman Polis represents such a radical, extreme departure from Governor Hickenlooper, because he wants to triple the size of Colorado's budget obligations. It doesn't have any idea how to pay for those.
Okay. Affordable housing. This is another one that's going to come back in the 2019 legislative session. It's a big topic, but where, if anywhere, does the state need to get involved in this discussion? And if there is a place the state needs to get involved, what would you like the state government to do?
Well, I use the term attainable housing because what may be affordable for somebody in the metro area may not be attainable for somebody in Pueblo or Grand Junction, and we really need to take a multi-pronged approach towards attainable housing. And by that I mean we need to make sure that we pass meaningful construction defects legislation. I think we may need to move to a right to cure over a 90 or 120-day period. I think it's insurable. The interim step that we took 2 years ago of having to go to an HOA board to sue, but if you have a cousin that's connected to the development business or your brother works for a contractor, you have to recuse yourself, really hasn't resulted in a growth of supply of condo permits that in the metro area, as opposed to 10 years ago, even though the population has increased by 1 million people. And so I think that ultimately, if you're building a 300-unit development, you're going to find a wire that's misplaced in a bathroom, and a right to cure makes sense to me as a practical way to increase supply. Also, the state of Colorado, and I'd be a governor that worked with CHAFA to modernize and expand the tax credit program for affordable housing. The demand for that program far outstrips the supply of tax credits. The process is laborious to get a tax credit. I would like to make it more efficient and effective for developers who want to put a portion of their project into affordable housing. I think it aligns the incentives of a real estate developer because time is money. Finally, the state should be a collaborative partner in public-private public-private partnerships going forward for affordable housing in the metro area, like St. Joe's Hospital is repurposing a lot of their buildings. Continuum Partners is a real estate firm in town, and they are working with the Walton Family Foundation, and the state should have a seat at the table to work with those organizations as well.
Walker, as we kind of near the end of our segment here, you talked a little bit about the regulatory environment here in the state of Colorado and improving business. Have you heard of any specific regulation that you would like to roll back if elected governor? And if you don't have any real specifics in that, talk a little bit about how you view the balance in an effective regulatory environment under a Stapleton administration.
Well, my friend Governor Matt Bevin has a red tape task force that he has put into play, whereby he has had individuals report on needless red tape from different areas of Kentucky's government. I think it's a great idea. I would put a Colorado spin on it and make sure that we created a task force that could actually talk about antiquated regulations at the DMV, at other levels in government. I'm familiar with a lot of them in the treasurer's office, but there's all sorts of waste that takes place in government. And during my time as treasurer, the budget in Colorado has expanded from $18 billion to $30 billion, and if we just cut it 2 or 3%, it could be a sizable extra pot of money, especially during recessionary times. And so I'm going to be a governor that makes sure that we have a red tape task force and we look at different regulations across all our state agencies that don't make sense.
Great. Right. Jeff, do we have time for one more? Or are we done?
Fire away. We're going to hit it. Walker, you've got about a minute and a half.
All right. Here's one last broad-based question for you, and that is, how would a Stapleton administration approach to business be different in general, both from the current administration and from a Polis administration? And I want you to particularly concentrate on the current administration since you've talked a lot about Polis so far.
Well, the current administration has, by and large, worked collaboratively with business, and I would continue collaborative policies to work with the business community, to work with the energy industry on a collaborative relationship, which is not combative in nature. I've agreed with Governor Hickenlooper on some big ticket items for Colorado, whether it be the Jordan Cove project in western Colorado, which has had bipartisan support from Senators Bennett and Gardner, and Congressman Polis has refused to support. I would join the governor in supporting the Northern Integrated Supply Project and Windy Gap, which is the most important water project we have for northern Colorado. So does Senator Gardner and Bennett support that project. Congressman Polis has refused, even though it's gone through a 10-year environmental review. I joined Governor Ritter in fighting against government health care, and Governor Hickenlooper and now Congressman Polis wants to bring government-controlled health care even back to Colorado and make it more expensive. So I have been a pragmatic leader, and Congressman Polis represents a radical extreme departure into fantasy land. And I just think that if you're promising people a yellow brick road and unicorns, it's your responsibility as a leader to explain to people how you're going to pay for things, or else it becomes an empty government promise of free. And free ends up being really expensive on the backs of the Coloradans who can least afford it, from energy to healthcare to education.
Well, thank you very much, Walker Stapleton. Best of luck to you in the race. And
thank you.
Ed and Jeff, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.